Our speaker, we have Dr. Caitlin Magel. She is an estuarine ecologist at University of Washington's Puget Sound Institute in Tacoma, where she primarily focuses on modeling the linkages between terrestrial and aquatic habitats, water quality, and social ecological outcomes. Before coming to UW, Caitlin completed her PhD at Oregon State University, studying eelgrasses in Oregon and Washington coastal estuaries. She also holds a master's in marine science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a BA in biology and environmental science from Lawrence University in Wisconsin. Caitlin will take questions as we go and after the talk. But yeah, so thanks everybody for coming, and a big thank you to our speaker for coming and sharing your work with us today.
Yeah.
With that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Cole. Yeah, thanks for everyone for being here and for inviting me to this seminar series. Yes, please feel free to interrupt me with questions, but if we get too far behind, I might put a pause on that, but we'll see how we go. As Cole mentioned, most of my work focuses on modeling and understanding social ecological trade-offs among management alternatives, specifically kind of crossing the terrestrial to marine and coastal zones. This work that I'm going to talk about today, myself and Joel Baker, who's here, are co-leading a project, and then also Tessa Francis has been integral in kind of setting up the work that I'm going to talk about today. Tessa is currently at the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And I'm here representing work that the Puget Sound Institute is leading, but there have been lots of partners on this work, and so I quickly want to mention those folks, some of whom are in the room today as well. So we have a big team that extends well beyond the Puget Sound Institute and includes folks from NOAA Fisheries, US EPA, Long Live the Kings, CSIRO in Australia, the Salish Sea Modeling Center here at UW, and the Pacific Northwest National Labs. So, and there are a few people missing from this list because we've had some recent changes in staffing as well, but it's a wicked team, and that's because we're trying to deal with wicked problems in the ecosystem here. So stressors originating from human actions and population growth and climate change threaten the freshwater, nearshore, and marine species and ecosystems, as well as the social and economic systems that depend on them. These impacts can be particularly far-ranging and complex in coastal urbanized coastal areas where long histories of development threaten the natural resources that we depend on in these systems. So Puget Sound, of course, is a good example of this. The Puget Sound region has become highly urbanized along the coastline, as you can see in this map of impervious surface here on the right. And we now see many symptoms of environmental degradation. So a major challenge for us is to understand how future conditions of population growth and climate change and our decisions to manage them will affect the interconnected natural and human systems, and how we can minimize trade-offs among multiple regional recovery goals. So you all might be familiar with this, but recovery objectives for Puget Sound are called the vital signs, and the vital signs are used to track the health of Puget Sound. Recovery plans have been established that indicate lay out the indicators of progress towards these recovery objectives and identify specific recovery interventions needed to achieve each of the objectives. But latest status reports indicate that most of the vital sign indicators are showing mixed results, no trend, or are getting worse. So it's clear that we need to do more. But with so many objectives and possible interventions, we need tools to help prioritize our actions in the context of climate change and population growth, and to understand the potential trade-offs among these recovery objectives. And that's particularly true for the human dimensions, for which we have comparatively less information. So at Puget Sound Institute, we are working with two modeling approaches that we think can be decision support tools in this recovery context for Puget Sound. So because numerical modeling of complex systems is challenging, we started first with an approach that some of you might be familiar with called qualitative network modeling, or QNM. So QNMs are operationalized conceptual models, and we can run simulations of the conceptual model and observe the responses of system components in response to perturbations. I'll show you more on the QNM in the next few slides. We're also working now with a more complex quantitative model suite that combines existing numerical models into kind of a integrated model suite. Both of these approaches derive from conceptual models and recovery plans that were developed with regional scientists and stakeholders, and they're both organized around a watershed framework, where activities on the land influence the conditions and species in Puget Sound, either directly or via connections through freshwater rivers and streams. So let's talk more about the qualitative approach. So qualitative network models, essentially, we reduce the system down to what we think are its most important components or nodes, and the linkages between them, and simplify the relationships between those nodes, or the links, to essentially just a positive, negative, or neutral relationship. We can represent feedbacks and indirect effects using these models. And then the analysis simulates the network thousands of times using randomly selected interaction strengths for each of the links. And those networks that are produced with the random interaction strengths are evaluated against stability criteria and then either accepted or rejected. And that process is repeated as many times as we need to get to the desired number of stable simulations. In this case, typically people do 10,000. So then, using this suite of simulations, we can perturb one or more nodes in the network and then observe the positive and negative responses of the other nodes in the stable simulations of the network. Due to that, the variation in the different simulations, those randomly selected interaction strengths, nodes will vary in their proportion of positive and negative responses. So here's an example of what the results might look like from a very simple network containing just 4 nodes, and the results of a perturbation on that network. So the number of positive and negative responses out of those 10,000 simulations is what's given by the colored bars, negative being the gray color and positive being the red color. So then we characterize basically this, what we call the sign consistency of each of the nodes based on the percentage of simulations that fall into the positive or negative categories. So equivocal nodes have basically equal or nearly equal numbers of positive and negative responses. Weak nodes have something between 60 and 80% of their responses that are either positive or negative. And then strong nodes have greater than 80% of those simulations giving a positive or negative response. QNMs can't tell us that a given node increased by X% or decreased by X%, but rather that the impact of a perturbation on a node is likely to be positive. So we don't know the magnitude of the response, but we know something about the likely direction of the response. So that's how the technique works in general. This is the qualitative network model that Tessa Francis and I developed for a hypothetical Puget Sound watershed. So it includes a subset of those biophysical and human well-being vital signs, or the recovery objectives, that are connected by human development drivers, and other physical, chemical, and biological components of the system that we assumed to be important. Since this is a fisheries department, I'll point out that we have salmon represented across multiple life stages. We have an important forage fish that everyone loves called herring, and we have an important critical nearshore nursery habitat for fish, eelgrass represented in the model as well, as many other system components. So using this qualitative network model, we evaluated scenarios of population growth using alternative network structures that originated from the rural new development and urban redevelopment nodes outlined in red there. So with projected population growth for the Puget Sound region, we know that development is going to happen one place or the other, but we think that we hypothesize that we can alter the nature of how that development proceeds and that might have downstream impacts on the Puget Sound system. So in the alternative networks, we varied the nature of the red dashed links leading from those two development nodes to represent different proposed development interventions. We then compared rural versus urban development strategies separately and in combination. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to highlight a few of the results from this work. But at the end, I have a link for the publication if you want to dig into those results more. Okay, so this is these simplified networks, I'm just showing you the nature of the red dashed links that were in the previous figure that originated from those development nodes. The rest of the nodes and the links in the model remained constant. So starting with the rural development scenario here on the top, this describes what we call the status quo situation where new development on rural land negatively impacts the extent or function of habitats, increases runoff, and increases transportation corridors, such as the development of new roadways. In the urban redevelopment scenario on the bottom here, this represents a scenario where status quo redevelopment enacts stricter regulations for stormwater management, but increases wastewater associated with just having more people. In both scenarios, we simultaneously perturbed both development nodes, one positively, so the one indicated in red, and one negatively, indicated in black. And then we categorize the response of recovery objectives and ecosystem stressors that were also included in the network model. So for recovery objectives, our preferred response of those is a positive or increasing response. And for stressors, the preferred response is a decreasing or negative response. And what we found is that in the rural growth scenario, we had weekly positive responses of the ecosystem stressors and generally weekly negative responses of the recovery objectives. This is an unfavorable response. In contrast, the urban redevelopment scenario resulted in slightly more favorable outcomes. So we saw weekly negative responses, primarily of the stressors, and weekly positive responses of the recovery objectives. This is slightly more favorable. While the responses were mostly synergistic across these recovery objectives, meaning that most of them responded negatively or most of them responded positively, we did see some interesting trade-offs. So for example, for the two culturally and ecologically important fish species that I have highlighted here, herring and Chinook spawners, they sometimes responded in converse to one another. So one increased and one decreased. This makes sense because juvenile Chinook eat herring, but it also indicates a potential trade-off that would benefit from further modeling and investigation. We also ran some perhaps more realistic scenarios where development happens on both urban and rural lands simultaneously, and where we might coordinate our actions, those kind of interventions across the landscape. So do some level of intervention on both urban and rural lands. So the status quo network on the top represents the exact same relationships that you just saw in the last example. On the bottom, however, this represents a scenario where we're doing some level of intervention associated with both urban redevelopment and rural development that we think will benefit the ecosystem objectives. So we still have development of new transportation corridors on rural land, but the extent and functions of habitats is improved, indicated by those arrows on the far side there. And then on rural or on urban lands, urban runoff and wastewater are reduced by redevelopment. So maybe we're putting in more stormwater parks, or improving our treatment of wastewater, for example. So in both of these situations, we now positively perturbed both of the development nodes and categorize the response. So here we see that stressors typically weakly increased in that status quo situation, and then most of the recovery objectives responded equivocally, meaning sometimes it was positive, sometimes it was negative, about the same amount of time out of those simulations. In contrast, we start to see more favorable outcomes indicated by this moderate level of kind of coordinated intervention, where ecosystem stressors are mostly responding negatively or are all responding negatively, and then most of the recovery objectives responding positively. And this kind of mirrors our understanding of the current ecosystem recovery performance, where we're really not seeing a lot of change in the direction that we'd like to under kind of the status quo that we're doing right now, but people talk about coordinating actions across rural and urban landscapes, and that might have more of an impact. Okay, so overall, what we found from the qualitative network model is that it's important where we develop. And we generally saw better outcomes when we do urban redevelopment to accommodate population growth versus rural new development. We also found that it's important how we develop. So on rural lands, we saw that increasing the area or quality of critical habitats resulted in improved outcomes, or by limiting the expansion of transportation corridors, we could reduce the impact of new stressors like toxics that are associated with roadways. And both of those actions had local and downstream benefits. And then on urban lands, we found that urban redevelopment presents the opportunity to address legacy issues like toxics and stormwater that can contribute to environmental justice, perhaps. And that green infrastructure provided an opportunity to maximize outcomes for both people and the environment. And then finally, the coordination of actions across urban and rural landscapes resulted in better outcomes than either intervention applied separately, indicating that this kind of cross watershed coordination results in efficiencies that could help us achieve some of the really large scale objectives. But so these qualitative network models are useful, but often people then say, okay, but where and how much do we need? And for that, we can't answer those questions with a qualitative model. We need spatially explicit, quantitative mathematical models. So enter the Puget Sound Integrated Modeling Framework, or PSIMF project, which we hope is going to allow us to answer those kind of where and how much questions, and also give us a sense of kind of the magnitude of response of the system to different interventions or stressors. So in this region, we benefit from having several well-developed and tested models that can be used in concert with one another to address pressing management questions. So our modeling teams are working right now to kind of link these models together to get them to talk to one another. And then we'll have a suite of models that covers the region from the mountains to the sound, and be able to ask some large scale ecosystem management questions. So how's this gonna work? The first model in our chain is called the land cover change model, which is being developed at the Puget Sound Institute. The land cover change model uses statistical modeling to derive past land cover changes, and then project them forward into the future. This will then pass information about land cover annually to our watershed eco-hydrological model, a terrestrial model called VELMA, which will have information about fate and transport of water flow across the landscape and nutrients, and then pass information about toxic loads and nutrient loads and freshwater flow to an estuarine circulation and hydrodynamic biogeochemical model called the Salish Sea model, which will then circulate and transform those nutrients and toxics and the freshwater around the estuary, and pass information about the nutrients and toxics and temperature in Puget Sound to a food web model called Atlantis, which will give us information about biomass and food web structure in Puget Sound. And then also we're gonna connect, because Velma can give us information about freshwater flows in the rivers, about the area of spawning habitat and rearing habitat, and other characteristics that we know are important to fish like salmon. We can derive some information about how the freshwater life history stage for salmon might change in the future under these modeled simulations. And then pass that information also to the Atlantis food web model so that they can kind of tune the productivity and capacity features of their model. This is just a subset of the parameters that will pass from one model to the next. There are many others as well, but hopefully you can now imagine at this large scale how a change or a management action would cascade through the integrated model. For example, if we see that development increases and the amount of impervious surface in the watershed increases into the future as predicted by the land cover change model, then we might observe, Velma might predict larger and more flashy runoff, potentially higher nutrient loads and toxic loads. And that could result in changes in stratification in Puget Sound, as well as changes to primary production, which would influence ultimately the food web, as well as then the human system, fisheries harvest and revenue from natural resource industries. Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding. Is there bi-directional movement, I guess, between the human aspect and the rest? So like if like humans adapt, or but is there some kind of feedback in this system?
There could be, yeah, there could be. Primarily with the biophysical models, it's kind of a one-way pass of information, but as far as the human center of this diagram here, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. But the types of scenarios that we're imagining running through this model will also relate to maybe decisions or actions that humans are making, or changes in governance that we think could influence the biophysical models. So that could definitely be a bi-directional handoff. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So when you present this, it feels like the food web model is kind of the end of the, I don't know, line system.
Yeah.
Are you looking directly at output indicator from this model, or are you like doing some of, what type of outputs are you looking at
Yeah,
from this?
good question. I mean, certainly, fish biomass or, fisheries, are one aspect that people are interested in, an outcome, right? Or an output from this model chain that people are interested in. But, depending on the decision maker or the stakeholder who are looking at these model results, they might also be interested in other aspects. They might be interested in, how, here, I'll just bring up. So these are some of the human-centric things, right? So they might be interested in looking at how housing density changes into the future and its impact on the ecosystem. They might be interested in how climate change is gonna influence drought. Or how, water quality in Puget Sound is changing. Because they, care about being able to recreate in Puget Sound or, harvest shellfish or something like that. So, there's outputs or outcomes of interest, I think, that we can derive from each of the models in the chain. But Atlantis certainly kind of represents a collector of those, the terrestrial, freshwater, marine kind of chain, represented by the model suite. Yeah, good questions. Okay, so I'm gonna provide a little more detail on each of the models and also talk about kind of what we're imagining for the kind of management perturbations that we might evaluate with this model. So the land cover change model is a newly developed model by Kevin Bogue at Puget Sound Institute. And it's based on National Land Cover or NLCD data. So it takes past trends in NLCD data sets showing changes in land cover, and then forecasts the yearly probabilities of parcel level land cover changes in the context of the Office of Financial Management's population projections, which are county level population projections for the Puget Sound region. And then other parcel features are taken into account when this model kind of makes decisions about land cover transitions. So things like proximity to urban growth areas or industrial centers, proximity to ferry routes or roads. At its core, though, the land cover change model is a state in transition simulation model based or powered by a Markov chain. The Markov chain is derived from those NLCD land cover changes between 2001 and 2021. And then there are spatial multipliers based on a random forest that basically compete for the state transitions between these land cover classes at each time step, so an annual time step. Then there are it's a stochastic process, so there are thousands of iterations of the model that then results in a probabilistic indication of future land cover composition across all of Puget Sound. Here's just a tiny snippet of what that looks like. So this is going to step through decadally. It's an annual model, but this is showing decadal changes in land cover as predicted by the land cover change model. And so you can see those pink, which are sorry if you can't see the legend in the bottom right, but the pink are the developed land cover classes, low, medium, and high intensity. And you can see the progression of that across just this snippet of the landscape. And this is projecting future, status quo future based on those historical trends projected forward. So assuming that development continues in the same way that it has. But we can also use this model to do kind of alternative scenarios where we alter those historical relationships between the transitions, between land cover classes. And some of the spatial variables. So for example, we could, adjust the probability of land cover transitions relative to urban growth areas, such as constraining growth inside the urban growth areas or allowing growth to happen wherever unrelated to urban growth areas. Or we could prevent development within a certain distance from riparian areas, for example. So we can not only just kind of project forward the same that we've observed, but we can also kind of tune some of the parameters in the model to result in alternative land cover distributions in the future. Okay, the next model in the chain is that the eco-hydrological watershed model called VELMA, which is a broadly applicable process-based model that simulates hydrology and biogeochemical processes on the landscape. So it can track and transport the fate of nutrients and contaminants within watersheds at a very granular scale and kind of follow those flow paths through the basin down to the freshwater. VELMA has done some advancements in order to be, so it's a broadly applicable framework. We are now applying VELMA to 24 Puget Sound watersheds. So this, I don't want to downplay this, but it's taken the better part of a year and a half to get to almost being ready to model all of these watersheds in VELMA. So parameterizing and calibrating flow and nutrients across all 24 watersheds at a 30-meter grid scale. It's a very fine grid scale. Some new applications in VELMA. There is a new soil data set that's going to be released or that we hope to have access to that will allow us to improve the flows in VELMA, their performance of the flows in the model. There's also a new septics data set from USGS that we're hoping will improve our estimations of nutrient loads, particularly in the more rural regions of the watershed where there are lots of on-site septics. And then also we've had to do some downscaling and blending of historical climate projections, historical and projections of climate to allow us to model future conditions in VELMA at a really fine scale where we can see differences in snowpack along elevational gradients in a way that's going to be relevant, we think, in the future, for example. Yeah.
Good question. Like what is shaded like is what you have is like the rest something you don't have because you cannot put on everything or you don't have data or.
I think some of the missing watersheds are we don't have the data. Like one of the keys is being able to calibrate to like a USGS flow monitoring station where we need observations in those watersheds to know that we're getting the flow right and the nutrients right. And so some of the watersheds that you see are missing are either just very small watersheds that probably have minimal influence, or we may not have the data to be able to calibrate, to parameterize and calibrate the model for those watersheds. Yeah. Just a quick look at this is the climate, this is how we're approaching climate, which is we have blended PRISM and MACA data sets to a finer resolution, and that's downscaled data from CM5, the RCP 8.5, so the high emissions scenario from CMIP 5. And you can just, this is just some example data of air temperature. Early century is the lower line, mid-century and late century across the year. So you see there that the tick up in and also seasonal differences in the air temperature projections based on this scenario. But what we're expecting from this scenario and what we will model with the PSINF project is summers that are up to 6 degrees Celsius warmer, places where we have above freezing temperatures year round, resulting in essentially no snowpack, no measurable snowpack in the spring, and then generally less precipitation. So we're expecting shifts in timing and amount of precipitation, the timing of runoff as a result of from that losing that snowpack. So this is kind of what we're expecting late century, and we're gonna, model that through the full suite. Okay, so the next model in the chain is the Salish Sea model. Again, this is a hydrodynamic circulation and biogeochemical model of Puget Sound that you have probably heard of. It models all of Puget Sound as well as the Strait of Juan de Fuca and the Strait of Georgia, covering much of the US and Canada in this region. It includes 64 rivers and streams and 99 point sources. Those are mostly wastewater treatment plants across the US and Canada. And previous work using this model has showed that conditions in the Salish Sea and in Puget Sound are responsive to variations in watershed flow, nutrient loads, altered ocean chemistry resulting from climate change and land use management. And so this model then serves as a conduit to evaluate how the terrestrial changes and ocean boundary changes impact conditions in Puget Sound, both for the kind of distribution and fate and transport of nutrients and contaminants, but also things like dissolved oxygen and primary productivity that are very relevant to the species, the fish that live in Puget Sound. And we'll also include, related to the climate change, we'll also include downscaled climate changes at the ocean boundary. So predicted changes in ocean chemistry and temperature will be included as well, using the same climate model and RCP 8.5. So much of the work that the Salish Sea model has done related to the PSIMF project is to start using the Velma-based flows, temperatures, and nutrients instead of their typical approach. The Salish Sea model currently uses a regression approach developed by the Washington Department of Ecology, where they calculate nutrient loads based on river flows using just a simple regression. So now the use of Velma instead to drive those flows and loads will allow us to more explicitly capture terrestrial changes due to development and climate change that we're expecting in the future. And you can see this is just an example of how nutrients or nitrates specifically are differ when you from the Salish Sea model when you use their traditional approach. How they've done it in the past versus this kind of Salish Sea model Velma integration. And so we're obviously looking at how the model results differ when we change the typical approach. Many of these models have been used a lot in the past and so have a long history of being used for questions in this region. We can evaluate how the linking of the models changes their outputs. And then also the Salish Sea model has recently worked on a PCB, fate and transport module. And it's been validated, at least in small scale uses in Puget Sound. So we also have the potential to scale that up and evaluate how fate and transport of PCBs around Puget Sound and the loadings from different watersheds. And then also can connect that with the Atlantis food web model and their incorporation of contaminants and bioaccumulation in the food web. So Atlantis, also people might be familiar with, this is an end-to-end ecosystem model and includes 73 functional groups and has information about the spatial distribution of species, biomass, abundance, diet, fisheries harvest, etc. And there has been a lot of advancements in the Atlantis model for Puget Sound that was motivated by this project. So for one, we have had to align kind of physically the grid cells, from the Salish Sea model, which is a relatively fine scale grid with many, many depth layers, to the polygons that are shown here, which are used by the Atlantis model. So kind of, a technical, requirement to align those. And then instead of driving Atlantis with a ROMS model, which is what they've typically used, and their own kind of biogeochemical module. Now we're using the outputs from the Salish Sea model, both the physics, the nutrients, temperature, phytoplankton from the Salish Sea model, which is happening at a finer scale, and forcing Atlantis with those inputs instead. This provides a framework to incorporate much higher resolution of forcing for both the physical and the biological factors, and also that higher resolution of future climate impacts, as well as the downstream effects of any terrestrial changes. Other really important advances that the Atlantis team has been working on is incorporating thermal response, so bioenergetics, and minimum oxygen tolerance for fish species into the Atlantis model. So we'll be able to look at impacts of temperature and DO on fish species movement and behavior, and the kind of trajectory of the food web resulting from that. And then also linking to a contaminant submodel where then we'll be able to model, like I said earlier, bioaccumulation of PCBs in the food web and impacts on fish species. And then finally, the integration I mentioned earlier of Velma and a habitat model called HARP that will allow us to describe the impacts of freshwater conditions on salmon, and adjust some of the parameters in Atlantis resulting from that. So just a little bit more information about that Velma HARP Atlantis integration. So HARP, if you're not familiar with it, is a model run by Tim Beachy at NOAA. It's called the Habitat Assessment and Restoration Planning. And it takes information about habitat and habitat conditions, and essentially includes those into a life cycle model where we calculate abundance and productivity of different salmon populations. So the HARP model has been parameterized for the Snohomish and the Stillaguamish, 2 river basins in our study area, and then for 3 species of salmon, so Chinook, steelhead, and coho. And what we plan to do is like I described earlier, basically take some of these Velma outputs as inputs to HARP so that we can look at future changes predicted by Velma and things like wood abundance and temperature and flow. Some things we won't be able to describe, so I crossed out fine sediments and armor removal. Those aren't capable from the Velma outputs, but most of these we can describe changes in those. And then see how productivity and capacity change resulting from the life cycle model in HARP. So then what the Atlantis team can do is adjust the spawner recruit relationship in Atlantis for those fish species. And the base model uses a Beverton-Holt relationship. So if HARP says that based on Velma outputs, capacity is going to decrease in the future, then we can tune that capacity function in the spawner recruit relationship. Or if HARP says that productivity is going to increase, then we can shift the spawner recruit curve in response to that. A limitation, though, is that we only have HARP for 2 watersheds and for 3 species of salmon, and there are lots of other watersheds that contain salmon, and there are other species of salmon. So we're still figuring out exactly how we can inform future conditions for those watersheds and species that we don't currently have HARP for. Yeah,
Is this like, detailed component for salmon was like, because you had that model available with this person, or was it like a demand from managers or something to have something more specific for salmon?
good question. I would say it's a little bit of both, right? Like, people wanna know about what's gonna happen with salmon, for one. For two, we know that the freshwater life history stage is really critical, and there are lots of, potential impacts there from development and climate change. And so we need a way to describe how that will proceed into the future. And so this is what we, the modelers, came up with based on what we knew was available for kind of modeling freshwater impacts to salmon already. And, kind of existing collaborator relationships. So, yeah, but it's not a perfect solution, obviously, but, yeah, I think motivated by both what people want to see and what the modelers deemed as being an important aspect to consider. Yeah.
Just trying to understand how Atlantis is being used here, because it's a marine model. So it doesn't actually have, I mean, they don't reproduce in the ocean. So
Yeah.
when you say you're increasing the staff recruit function in Atlantis, what does that mean? Just the
Hem,
marine survival stage?
would you like to answer? Yeah.
So we don't model the marine phase explicitly. It's like kind of a black box. But they are undergoing that part of their life cycle before they come back into the body.
But you're basically handling what HARP would do within Atlantis. And
No, so, one thing I was gonna clarify for Caitlin is that we're not actually using any part of the life cycle model. What we're using are the inputs to the life cycle model. So we take those inputs that are the translation from the habitat into the capacity and productivity to modify the beverage and hold parameters in the planet.
okay, so Atlantis is trying to model the entire life cycle.
Yeah, but Atlantis is not explicit about the freshwater conditions and habitats. Where we can get that information, though, is from the Velma watershed model. So we're kind of doing this like kludge, where then we can represent, important changes in the terrestrial life history stage for salmon in the food web model. Yeah.
I'm just curious about like this like model chain. Are you, so say from Velma output going into HARP, is output going directly into the model and being treated as data, or you're just using it to inform how you fit the HARP model? It's not actually included in the model itself.
We're still working on like what the workflow will exactly look like. What we imagine, though, is that Velma outputs, spatial temporal Velma outputs can be used to drive HARP. And then it sounds like we're taking like an intermediate result from the HARP model that then will be used to tune parameters in Atlantis. So there's like an physical data handoff, and then we're gonna mine some of the information from the life cycle model in HARP. And tune the Atlantis parameters. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, Hem? Okay. All right, okay. Lest we forget that Puget Sound is a social and ecological system with important objectives and endpoints also in the human dimensions. And so it's important for PCIV to be able to account for those dynamics as well. This, like I said earlier, is more of a modeling challenge, right? Compared to the natural system, the human system is harder to describe with equations and functions. and numbers and harder to connect mathematically to the other biophysical models in the framework. Through flows of water and nutrients and salmon, et cetera. So we're still working out exactly what this aspect of the project is gonna look like. But here are some of the things that we're thinking about, and we welcome feedback on this too. So one option would be back to the qualitative modeling approach. We could boil down those quantitative models into a qualitative model and link to aspects of the human system. And then evaluate, test basically both the natural system behavior. So compare a qualitative model for behaviors to the the behavior of the quantitative models. Plus be able to say something about how the human system components respond. That's one option and probably one that we will pursue, but what exactly that's gonna look like is still to be determined, like I said. Another option that we're really interested in and hoping to bring on a postdoc to do this is economic analyses. So there are, in economics, I'm not an economist, so let me just caveat everything I'm about to say next, but things have, market value, that is, they're traded in markets, they have observable values. Or they might have non-market value, or they might also have non-market value, meaning that it's not traded in a market, we can't observe the value of that, but it might have an existence value, or it might contribute to quality of life in economic terms. Or it might have cultural or spiritual value. And so some of these things we can observe directly from the quantitative biophysical models. So for example, knowing the market value for salmon and based on Atlantis's projections of catch, we would know the value of salmon into the future. We would be able to model that. Or things like drinking water and carbon sequestration can be derived from the Velma outputs, and we could probably come up with a market value for that. We can also infer from what they call hedonic analyses, which is basically using the sale prices of land parcels as a proxy for measuring individuals' willingness to pay for different property locations or features. So for example, we could evaluate how drought influences housing prices in the Puget Sound area based on historical relationships between drought and housing, land sale value, and then forecast that into the future under the Velma predictions for drought conditions or aridity on the landscape. Or for waterfront properties, we could observe the influence of water quality of this body of water on housing prices based on historical land sale data, and then project that into the future based on what the Sailor Sea model and Velma are saying about freshwater and marine quality and quantity of water, for example. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about for the humans model, but still kind of refining what exactly that will look like. Getting at non-market values though would include probably a survey, like a willingness to pay survey or a willingness to act survey. So that's another option of kind of an economic analysis that could be done in coordination with these biophysical models. Okay, now I'm really short on time, so I'll just say that we're considering, within the context of population growth and climate change that are coming from the model inputs or the models themselves, running alternative management perturbations around growth management and development, for potential to evaluate changes in forest management or riparian buffers. We could run scenarios about agricultural BMPs, targeting nutrients, for example, stormwater infrastructure management, such as the placement of new green stormwater infrastructure, And of course, fisheries management such as hatchery supplementation or changes to catch, rules. We have a workshop next Friday where we're gonna meet with stakeholders and kind of talk about these management scenarios, and get them to help us kind of refine this list, and the details of what we might do within these kind of broad buckets, and also prioritize what people want to be seen, what people want PSINF to be used for in the next year. And then also thinking about future iterations of this work and kind of what would be the next questions that we might look at, given that we have limited time to kind of do this initial proof of concept. Okay, so ultimately, we think there's a lot of value in using and combining both qualitative and quantitative analyses and models. They allow us to synthesize decades of data, but also qualitative information about the landscape that we live in here. And that they'll allow us to understand cumulative and interactive effects of multiple threats, climate change, population growth, but also how we intend to manage them in the future. And then hopefully identify some comprehensive solutions that are aimed at both social and ecological objectives. With that, thanks so much. If you're interested in the qualitative network modeling paper, that QR code will take you there, or if you want to learn more about the PSINF project, we do have a website. Yeah, thanks so much.
Awesome. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, if anybody has any.
Abby?
I'll take it,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, great talk. I particularly like how you use your loop analysis to inform, or at least find hypotheses that then you explored in this bigger project. One question that I had about your qualitative models is that, like, oftentimes it seems like the structure of these networks that you design determines to a bigger extent, well, to some extent at least, like the outcomes that you get out of them. So I was wondering if you had explored any kind of like different versions of this networks, or like any uncertainty in the way that the nodes are connected and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Definitely that is a problem with qualitative models, is like you can devise the qualitative model to give you the answer that you want. That's true of quantitative models too, actually, but there are some pretty slick ways of comparing different network structures though, to evaluate, basically do a sensitivity test of like, if I remove that link or remove that node, how does that change the results? So we did do, we didn't use a super formalized approach for doing that, but I've seen some more papers recently where they're kind of formalizing this approach to evaluating the influence of network structure beyond just the interaction strengths, right? Which are already varied across the different network models. So there are some more formal approaches. We used kind of an informal one where I just kind of tried a bunch of different things and saw which had impacts or not. But they were also, the network was based on previous conceptual models and, regional scientists and stakeholder workshops to inform the network structure in their conceptual models, which then fed into the qualitative model. So in some ways, we kind of wanted to maintain those relationships that had already been mutually agreed upon. Yeah.
No more hog-looking. This is fantastic. I love all this stuff. It's really, it's super impressive. I feel like you've really got, one extreme and the other extreme. I mean, this talk from going from qualitative to quantitative here is, orders of magnitude.
Yes. The
and
funding is also orders of magnitude. Yeah.
And I'm curious if you're, curious about any sort of intermediate complexity model that you might think would be indicated, kind of garnering what you've learned from both of them in terms of like, after you've run the individual integrated models, it's like, okay, well, let's see, the main driver here really was this one thing.
Yeah,
I'm curious, kind of what you think whether you think that would be strategic in the sense of people's confidence in the outcome or ability to understand, just because this is, it's fantastic. I love this integrated model, but it takes half an hour just to explain it
yeah,
and.
And
anyway,
months
I can
to run
imagine
it.
people
Yeah.
pick, for endlessly, blah, 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 I don't like that part, whatever. So
Yeah.
anyway, I guess I was just curious in terms of, and really, really from a strategic point of view, do you think that would be?
yeah, I think that's a great idea, and in some ways, being able to compare the really boiled down qualitative network model approach and the highly quantitative, highly parameterized and validated approaches, if they perform somewhat similarly, that would be great to know. So that's one thing we're really interested in, but then I love your idea that maybe there's then an intermediary going forward. We can learn from the extreme ends of the spectrum and meet in the middle somewhere with a kind of more strategic model that would be lighter on its feet and faster to run, and we could maybe do more simulations of, but that we've confirmed that the other models are performing or giving similar answers, perhaps. Yeah, one thing we've talked about, because we have some really great postdocs on this project, who are interested in AI and machine learning, is that perhaps we could like train a machine learning or an AI model based on the results of these other approaches. And a suite of scenarios that we might run with the highly quantitative model suite, and then train using AI a machine learning model to predict then other futures and see how that works. So that's one kind of the cutting edge of this that would be awesome to explore. Yeah.
We have one question online, it's asked the uncertainty associated with all these quantitative models will be cumulative when you link them together.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with this?
Yeah, I knew this question was gonna come. Yes, definitely. That is a huge challenge when we talk about linking models, for sure. I think so. One way of approaching that, which is maybe somewhat unsatisfactory, but is probably the reality of the situation, is that we can't possibly account for all of the uncertainties, but we are using the same model framework, and we're gonna compare across scenarios using the same model framework. Kind of a relative comparison of outcomes across a suite of scenarios that are modeled using the PSIM suite, they should all, in theory, have a similar level of uncertainty associated with each of those scenarios. So if we're focused on the relative outcomes across the suite of scenarios modeled with the PSIM suite, then perhaps the importance of all of those small or large uncertainties is less critical to understand. That being said, each of the individual models has its own understandings of uncertainties, its own performance metrics that have been established through prior work. And so they're all working to meet or exceed those thresholds for performance that they have established through prior work. So, we have some understanding of performance of each of the models and standards that have been set. And so we will meet or exceed those and go from there. But I also think focusing on the relative differences between the different scenarios is one way of kind of getting past that idea of compounding uncertainty.
Awesome. Well, I think we're just about out of time. If there are follow-up questions,
Please reach out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And thank you everybody for coming. Yeah. And next week, we're gonna hear from two graduate students here from UW, Helen Miller on spatiotemporal interpolation on a river network, and Han Wu on integrating spatial dynamics into discrete choice models. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone so much.